Hello, welcome to another Odd Paintings. I'm Dewan Moore and I'll be taking you through the process from going from a blank piece of paper to a finished, surreal, strange, funny, sometimes dark artwork. Today's video is an interesting one because I thought it would be a no-brainer. I thought the artwork would be fairly straightforward, but it proved to be a lesson in perseverance and patience for me. So if you enjoy these videos, give them a like and subscribe to the channel to see more. But other than that, onwards with the process of creating the artwork. Okay, so today's painting kind of happened by accident, really. It wasn't what I was sort of planning to do, and I was having my morning cup of tea and I was contemplating possible things to paint today, and this little robin came and sat on my window and made so much noise. I kind of had to paint him. You know, it was quite early in the morning and I kind of thought, geez, this guy's wanting to be an alarm clock. He's given a rooster a run for his money with the amount of noise he's making. So I decided, right, you're going to be the painting today. So I kind of humanized him a little bit, anthropomorphized him, kind of like the idea that he's pulling his shirt open to show off that typical red chest that robins have. Did a few little thumbnail sketches before I started to figure out where the figure goes on the page. I decided pretty much before I started this was going to be a painting, so the drawing was a little rougher than usual because I kind of wanted to get most of it down on the page. I kind of thought the robin's red chest would be kind of a big thing, and that's difficult to get across in a grayscale drawing. So hindsight being 2020, I could have played with the composition a little bit more, perhaps made the robin more bird-like and less person-like, you know, change the balance of that a little, and maybe had him a little smaller on the page. But I really just wanted to get this idea that this little fella is casting a really long shadow in the early morning, and really wanted to show off, which I feel the drawing still kind of shows quite nicely, and just putting, you know, those clouds on the horizon that I like to do so much. Just sort of finishing the drawing off, so I've got kind of a guide to where this is going to be when I transfer it to the MDF for the painting. And there's the finished drawing. Fairly happy with that as a rough compositional sketch. Works quite nicely. Okay, moving on to the MDF with the transferred drawing. I do my usual thing with our good old friend burnt sienna. You can see I put the burnt sienna on quite thick on the ground because that's probably the colour it's going to end up being, and the more paint I can build up, the more time and effort it'll save me later. And I'm just doing the usual thing here, building up the values so I know roughly what colour things are going to be. There's a couple of things I do a little differently in this painting. I'll use wash in a moment, which is something I don't normally use, and ultimately it's what caused me a few problems later on. So just a little bit about wash. If you are using wash in your paintings, make sure when you put wash down that the paint underneath is totally dry, not just dry to the touch, but totally dry. Otherwise you can run into problems with it coming off the board. The other thing is if you put wash over the top of thick paint and then you go back to that thick paint before that wash is really dry, you'll run into problems which you'll see later on. And the other big issue with this painting was that I was try to use up some paint. So the burnt sienna, I actually used this from a much older tube, a tube I've had kicking about probably for about 10 or 12 years, and I can almost guarantee it's been left open or it's been contaminated with something else at some point, so that was causing me a few problems as well. Okay, you can see I'm building up the grass now. Grass is not something I enjoy painting, but I again, going for believability over realism, I want to create the illusion of grass without actually painting every single blade of grass. So the way I go about this is I build up texture on the board through dabbing my paintbrush in various layers of either that cream color mixed with the burnt sienna, or a darker version mixed with some blue. And I just go over the top to create a gradient, and then I go over that with with more and more marks, and you'll see I'll put a wash over the top of that later on to make it blend a little better and a little more clearly. Right now I wanted to create that idea of the early morning, so the paint was too bright, so there you go, I'm putting the wash on. That first wash went okay. I also wanted to create a more of a yellowish thing, but unfortunately I didn't actually have any yellow paint, which is a bit of a bad thing to say, so I had to make yellow in my own kind of way, and put in a wash of burnt sienna made anything that was white become a yellowish colour. I also wanted to try something a little different with the clouds this time around, so you can see I'm kind of sculpting them a bit more. I'm using a bluish colour to sort of build them. I was quite pleased with the clouds in this piece, to be honest, so that's pretty good. Right now they're far too light, so you'll see that I go over them with a wash later on as well. And I think this is an important note for perhaps newer artists or artists who are coming at paintings for early on, or maybe even for the first time, is very rarely do things in my work go according to plan, and the trick is a little bit of perseverance, and sometimes just walking away, taking a break, coming back to it a little bit later when the paint's dry or it's settled, and just giving it a bit of space. So my advice to you newer or younger artists is just finish it. Finish whatever you do and then make a decision about it. Get through it, take a break in the middle, but do finish it. And you can see this is where I run into problems. I'm having real trouble getting the paint to stick there, and that's because the wash is still wet. And you'll see in a moment, I'm having trouble with that eye, getting it on there, and yeah, there we go, it's not really sticking, and I accidentally pull a big chunk of paint off. So I took a break, I had some lunch while I waited for it to dry properly, a bit disheartened. I have a go with some stars. I'm very aware that when they dry they're not going to really look like stars, but really it just builds up a little bit of texture on the image. They won't be anywhere near as bright as that when it dries. So yeah, once I've waited a little while, I come back and I fix what's wrong with it. Sometimes, folks, it's difficult to subtract your experience of the painting and then how the painting looks. So though initially I wasn't super happy with this, I can try and take away the experience of painting it, which wasn't as enjoyable as it normally is, just because I felt like I was fighting with the paint more than anything. But I finished it, and the next day when I took a look at it, it wasn't quite as bad as I thought. And sometimes that's all you can do. Is just make that decision later on. I mean, even painting the shirt here, I was having issues with that. But hopefully I've resolved some of the issues I was having with the paint for the next painting. Fingers crossed. But every painting's a challenge in its own little way. And the last finishing touches I put on him, sort of defining those trousers and the shirt, and when I go in and I add a little rim light behind him, it sort of brings it together a little bit more, so I'm feeling a bit better about things by that point. And like I said, I could have given up before then, and I never would have got to the point where I'd say, you know what, it's okay. But yeah, just persevere with it. That's what I'd say. If it is getting too much, take a break, come back to it later. Like I said, I think I took like an hour break when I'd made that mistake. So yeah. And just so you know, folks, I think the painting time on this one was, with the break and everything, I think it was probably around 4 hours, 4.5 hours, something like that. A wiser artist than me once said, no painting is ever finished, it's only ever abandoned. And sometimes that's the case, and I feel that way with this one, unfortunately. Okay, and there you have it, the finished artwork. Though I wasn't overly pleased with the painting when I'd completed it, hindsight being 2020, given the paint a bit of time to settle, I'm not as displeased with it. But obviously there are things I would do differently
if I was spending more than a day on a piece like that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like if you did. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time, folks. Take it easy.